Hey guys, it's Alexis, aka The Soft Reader. I'm here today to do a very exciting video. I'm here to talk about my top 16 books of 2016. There are a couple of books on this list that totally surprised me. I did not expect to absolutely love these books as much as I did. There are some books on this list that when I picked them up, I pretty much knew right away that I would love them. Most of these are in a series, only like 3 that are standalone of the 16. Most of these are in a series. Some of them are the last book in a series, or like the middle book in a series. It's whatever. I just kind of have these books. These are my favorite books I read this year. Most of these books got 5 stars from me. Some of them didn't get 5 stars because objectively I know that they're not perfect books, but for whatever reason I am just obsessed with them. Also too, these are not in any particular order. These are just the order I read them in, so they're not in a ranking order. They're just from the start of the year to the most recent one that I read, and yeah, we'll go ahead and get into it. The first book I'm going to mention is the one that kind of really kicked off my year for me, and that is Air of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. If you've kind of been on my channel for a while, you know that I love this book so much. Before I even finished reading it, I actually went and got a tattoo of it because I just loved this book so much. I just supremely connected to Selena's character specifically in this book. And I also really liked the addition of getting to meet Manon in this book. And yeah, I love this book. I read this book in Queen of Shadows this year. And by far this is my favorite in the series so far. The next book I read in 2016 that's going to make it onto this list is the finale to the Lunar Chronicles, which is Winter by Marissa Meyer. A lot of people gave this book, you know, not quite as high a rating as I did because they felt that it was too long or that it was kind of convoluted, but honestly, I loved it. It never felt to me like I was reading 800 pages. I really enjoyed every chapter. I enjoyed getting to kind of see everything come together in the finale. I'm very happy with the way it ended, and for that, it makes it on this list. The next book I'm going to mention is the second book in a series I read this year, and it's also a new author that I checked out for the first time this year, and it's the only author on this list who has more than 1 book, because I just love her so much that she got 2 books on this list. But the first book I'm going to talk about is A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. I read both A Darker Shade of Magic and A Gathering of Shadows this year, and both got 5 stars from me. I loved them both, but I loved A Gathering of Shadows so much. I just devoured everything about this book. Also, this book has a magical competition in it, and if you guys don't know, that is one trope that I will always be here for. Magical competitions will be the trope I ride with until I die. So yeah, I mean, basically this had all my buzzwords, and I love these characters enough anyway, and I love V.E. Schwab's writing, and yeah, I love this book so much, and Conjuring of Light will probably actually kill me. The next book I'm going to mention is part of a series I started and completed this year, and this just happens to be my favorite book of the series. And a lot of people are probably going to be confused. They're going to be like, that's your favorite book in the series. And I get that, but it's because I just had such a good time reading it, and that is The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. I read all 4 books in the Raven Cycle this year, in the first like 3 or 4 months of the year. And I enjoyed every one of them, don't get me wrong, but The Dream Thieves is still my favorite. It's the one that didn't honestly disappoint me in some way, with the exception of The Raven Boys, but I just had such a great time reading this book because I remember making Goodreads update posts about this book where I was like picking up what Maggie Stiefvater was putting down, and I was like, hey, I think this is gonna happen. I could be wrong, but... And then I was so proud of myself at the end of this book when all of those things I predicted happened, and I was just like, yes. So I just this is just such a dream come true for me, basically, because everything I wanted to happen in this book happened. I loved it, and I loved that this book was the one that really kicked off Ronan's huge role in the series, and as you guys know, I am always here for Ronan Lynch. I love him. I will always love him. The next book I'm going to mention is actually the book in the series I think that is collectively everybody's favorite. So, whereas the last one was kind of a, what the hell? This one is kind of like, oh, okay, yeah. But it is a kind of polarizing series, but I read all 3 books in this trilogy this year, and I became pretty obsessed with it. And this particular book is my favorite in the series. I don't know, it's really hard to say that because this one and the third book are very, 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 very close tie, but I just love everything that happens in this book, and Anyway, that is Princess Gambit by C.S. Pacat. Yes, I read the entire Captive Prince trilogy this year, and like I said, this and King's Rising are a very, very, very close tie, but ultimately I do prefer Princess Gambit a lot more because this is the book where you really see Damon and Laurent's relationship progress. This is where they really go from being two people who dislike each other to being two people in love. And neither of them will use that word until the third book, but it totally happens in this one. I love the series, I love this book, I love Damon and Laurent's relationship, I love Damon, he's perfect, and of course, I mean, honestly, books 2 and 3 both could have made it onto this list, but I tried to stick to one book a series, so it goes to Princess Gambit. The next book I'm going to mention is a book that made me cry a lot. And I was actually reading it at work, and I had to stop reading it because I knew that I was getting to the point where it was going to make me bawl my eyes out. And I was like, I can't do that at work. That'll be completely embarrassing. And it's a book I'm not surprised made me cry because of what happens in it and the shared experience I kind of have with the story. And that is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Obviously inspired by the story of Ramesh Dodd, and with illustrations by Jim Kay, and boy, are those illustrations just, I mean, fantastic. You probably can't see them really well on camera, but they're so gorgeous, and I read a lot of Patrick Ness books this year, because I completed the Chaos Walking trilogy, but this one is just, this one hit me so hard. As someone who has been through a similar situation as Connor in this book, and dealing with the emotions that Connor goes through, I've dealt with them myself, and so to be able to read this story and just see so much of what I went through in this character, like, broke my heart into 100 pieces, but it was so good. And it's a beautiful story, and I haven't seen the movie yet, but I want to so bad, and a lot of people have said it's really good, and I just hope it really does this book justice, because this book was just so fantastic. The next book I'm going to mention is one that has awakened a new love in me, and I talk about this book all the time on my channel because I love it so much, and that is Vengeance Road by Aaron Bowman. I've talked about it before, that this book made me realize I have a love of westerns that I never knew I had, because pretty much the entire western setting in this story I gobbled up. I've always loved historical fiction, which is what a western is, but I never really knew I liked the western genre, and so, like, picking up this book and flying through it and loving it as much as I did was such a shock to me, because I was like, holy crap, I really, really like westerns, which just shocked me because I was not expecting that. The next one I'm going to mention is my favorite Harry Potter book I read this year. Those of you guys know, I read the first 4 Harry Potter books this year. It was my goal to read all of them. I epically failed since I only read the first 4. But I highly enjoyed all of them so much, and that being said, of course, one of them had to make it onto this list, and so of the 4 that I read, I chose my favorite, which was Prisoner of Azkaban, or Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I really liked this book. I've seen all the movies, obviously. I don't remember loving this particular movie that much, but I loved this book so much. This is the first one where it kind of felt like things were starting, and it was really dark. I really liked that, and I am really, really excited to continue on and read the last 3 books in the series. On the fence about whether I'll read Cursed Child, but that's another video. But I really, really, really love Prisoner of Azkaban, and so far it's my favorite book in the series. The next book is one of the books that I can objectively say is not a perfect book, but I, for whatever reason, loved it so much, because it's the first Own Voices book about this particular marginalized group that I've ever read about before, and I had been so hyped to pick this book up when I first heard about it. It was a really good contemporary in my opinion, and while the author definitely has a lot of room to improve, I felt the story was great for what it was, and that was If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Rousseau. Of course, this is Own Voices. Meredith Russo is trans, and the main character Amanda is also a trans female, and the cover model is trans, and so all of that together made me so excited to pick this book up, and in the end I really liked it. So many aspects of this story I really, really loved. I loved Amanda's relationship with her father. I really liked one part of the story is because it takes place in the South, and I liked the portrayal of the South, and being from the South, I actually did. It was neither buffoony, but it was also really realistic of part of the, some of the gritty parts of the South, but I really liked that the story talks a lot about Amanda's relationship with her religion and her faith. I like that Meredith Russo threw that in. It didn't necessarily need to happen. I really liked it. I loved everything about the story. Meredith Russo is writing a new book, and I'm so hyped for it. The next one on my list is the only classic on this list, but it was a book that I should have known I was gonna love, but I was like, oh, okay, I'll just pick it up. It's short, it's whatever. I half listened to it on audiobook and I half read it, and I am obsessed with it. It's no surprise that I love dystopians, so it should have been no surprise that I fell in love with Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. I loved this book so much. I loved everything it had to say about censorship and society and government and individuality. It's so good, and it's so dystopian, and I loved it. And I loved this book. Again, I love dystopians. I'm dystopian trash, so it really should not have surprised me how much I love this book, but I loved it. It's now one of my favorite classics of all time, and yeah, I love this book. It was great. The next one is the only nonfiction book on this list, which I'm gonna be honest, I'm surprised I even have a nonfiction book on this list. And that is the Hamilton, The Revolution by Jeremy McCarter and Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm Hamilton trash, like, I don't know, 75% of the other world. I love Hamilton. I loved this book, and I loved getting to learn not just about the music, but also about the individual cast and crew members, and kind of how everything came to life. I just loved it, and I love Hamilton, and I loved learning everything I possibly could about Hamilton, and I'm just Hamilton, y'all. The next book on my list is one that a lot of people loved and a lot of people strongly disliked. Clearly it's on this list, so I'm in the highly loved bracket. But it's basically my newest obsession. I literally read like at least one review on this book every day to see how people are still gauging it, and then I like clap to myself if somebody rated it good, and then if somebody rated it bad, I'm just like, I'm sad now. That's a bummer that you didn't enjoy this book, because I'm obsessed with it, and I want people to start drawing me fan arts of it so I can become even more obsessed with it, and everybody on my Tumblr can know how much I love this book. And that is Three Dark Crowns by Kendar Blake. I loved this book. So many people said that they thought it was slow, they didn't like the world building, they didn't like the characters, and I loved all of that. I loved the world building in this book. I thought it was fantastic. And I didn't mind that it was slow, because I thought it was a lot of political intrigue and a lot of character, giving backstory to the character. And to me, I didn't find it info dumpy, because I was so eager to learn more and more and more. And I loved this book so much. And I loved each of the three queens. I didn't always, but by the end of it, I really enjoyed each of them. I liked how they are so different from where they started out at the beginning of this book. Anytime I wasn't reading this book, all I was thinking about was wanting to read this book, and I was thinking about the stuff that was happening, and I was like, oh my gosh, such and such, such and such and such and such, and I loved this book so much. So if you are in the group of people who loved Three Dark Crowns, please talk to me about it, because I freaking loved it. The next book I'm going to mention is another one that I can objectively say isn't the best book, but for whatever reason, I loved it so much. And I really want everybody to read it, and I realize that probably not everybody will love it, and it's not the best book ever written, but I loved it. I can't say that enough, and that is Shallow Graves by Callie Wallace. Of course, I read this back for the Spookathon back in October, and I loved this book. This is Callie Wallace's debut novel, and it's a supernatural, paranormal thriller, and I just loved it. It's very much, grindhousey, and it talks about a lot of stuff. I loved the diversity in this book. The main character is bisexual, and she's biracial, And I love the diversity in this book. I loved a lot of the things that Callie Wallace says throughout this book. Loved the way this was written. It jumps back and forth a lot between past, present, and future for the different characters, and I really liked that. I thought it flowed really well for the book. I really loved this book. I highly, highly recommend it, and I cannot wait to see what Callie Wallace writes in the future. The next book I'm going to mention is the second book by this author that I read this year. I read her first debut novel earlier this year, and then I read this one when it came out, so I'm sure you all can tell what book that is. Of course, I am talking about Nicola Yoon's The Sun Is Also a Star. A lot of people, same thing, didn't really love this book. I loved this book so much. I loved everything this book had to say about being an immigrant in America, about being a second-generation immigrant in America, about what it means to be an American, what it means to be a youth in America, and I loved the way it was written, how there were so many, you know, it was short chapters about Daniel and Natasha, and then it was so much about, you know, history and chemistry and physics and the characters, and I loved it. And even though I wasn't completely in love with Daniel and Natasha's romance, because it is a little insta-lovey, it takes place in a day, but the book is about fate, and the book is about, you know, being on this course and having these amazing things happen to you, and that's what this book is about, and I loved it. I loved how so many things that happened in the beginning of this book ended up becoming, you know, something in the end of the book, and it just felt so well planned out to me, and I loved the way it was written. And I loved Nicola Yoon's first book, which I also read this year, Everything, Everything, but this one to me was just so much more bittersweet than Everything, Everything was. Both of them I gave 5 stars to, but this one is one of my all-time favorite books of all time. The next book is another contemporary. I'm actually surprised I have so many contemporaries on this list, and that was a book that I really wasn't that interested to read until I saw Emma over at Emma Books kind of blurb it, I think back in October, and it made me very, very excited to pick this book up, and I'm so glad that I did, because I loved it so much. And that book, of course, is Every Last Word by Tamara Ireland Stone. This is a book about mental illness. Loved Sam as the main character so much. I could totally relate to Sam, and a lot of the things I went through in high school, I saw it in Sam, and I loved that. I mean, from page 1, I was so invested in Sam's story, because I was like, I've been there, I've had that happen to me, I had a shitty group of friends, I, you know, never had OCD, but I can still relate to the struggle of having a illness that really prevents you from being able to function on a day-to-day basis, and I loved this book so much. And I'm not really big into poetry, but I actually really enjoyed some of the poetry I read in this story, especially because some of them are lighthearted, some of them are dark, but I still really, really enjoyed them. I just loved this book so much, and the plot twist at the end of the book I did not see coming, and it took my breath away. I literally had to stop reading, put my Kindle down, and like go make me a pot of coffee, because I had to like actually let my brain process what I had read, because I couldn't believe it had happened, and I was just like, what? But yeah, I loved this book, and for that reason it makes it into my top 16 list. And now, The Gauntlet, the final book on my list. If you remember, I told you there'd be another Victoria Schwab book on this list, and it's this one. And it's a book, at first, when I first finished it, I didn't think I really loved it. I knew I liked it, and I knew objectively that it was a great book. I'm talking about Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I knew I would like this book. I had no doubt about it. I love V.E. Schwab. I knew I would like this book. But I didn't think that it would leave such an impression on me. This book ended, and I was kind of just like, okay, it was good. And then I like sat to write my review a couple days later on it, and I was just like, wow, this book was really good. And then like I was driving in the car today, and I literally spent like 45 minutes just thinking about Vicious, and just thinking about the characters, and like how clever some of the stuff is, and how much I love Victor as an anti-hero, but how much I loved his relationship with Sydney and Mitch, and how they're this like awkward little conglomerate of people who've just found each other, and how much I loved Serena and Eli as like bad guys, good guys, and I I loved it. I loved everything about this book. I mean, I really don't even have, I know I said that for everything on this list because these were my favorite books of the year, but this was the one that, like, I was 100% sure would not make it onto this list, and yet, here I am. And it's on there. Alright guys, halfway through this video my camera shut off because I think the video is too long, so we'll see what it's like when I edit it down. It'll probably be super long, but this is actually going to be my last video of 2016. I'm pre-filming, but I plan for it to go up on the 31st, so you know what? That's pretty right that it's gonna go out with a bang and it's gonna be great. And you guys should let me know down below maybe what are your top 5 favorite books of the year. See if you can narrow it down. And I will see you guys soon in 2017 with a new video. Bye!